right. Looks like we're recording. So thank you to the three of you that showed up today. I think this webinar I've been planning for months, and I think the timing was really awful, but at the same time, very important that we still talk about the need to apply for SNAP. So I'm going to get into all that. We're not going to touch on the government shutdown a whole lot. I feel like we've covered that in my monthly newsletter and some of the newsletters you may be getting from Second Harvest if you're a partner agency. If you want to have a bigger discussion about that, we can chat offline. But today we're going to cover the topic of applying for SNAP. So this is part three in the three-part series. So let me go back to sharing my screen. At any time, just some housekeeping, anytime through the PowerPoint. If you have questions, I should have time at the end, but you're welcome to put them in the chat or come off mute. At the end, there will be a chance to answer a trivia question for a $10 gift card. So make sure you hang out and pay attention for the whole webinar so you can get to participate in that. So part one and two of this quarterly engagement that I did, part one, I believe we just talked about what is SNAP, and then part two was eligibility for SNAP and categories that you have to pay special attention to in terms of eligibility, like immigrant population, students, felons, and ABODs. So if you missed those, I believe I do have recordings of those. So if you are wanting to access those, let me know offline and I can get those to you. So today we're going to actually cover how do you apply? What is the application process for SNAP? And how do you keep your benefits once you are approved for them? Okay, so I'm going to skip over this. I think we all are aware that SNAP is vital. For every one meal that a food bank can provide, SNAP provides nine. We know that there is economic benefit to people spending their SNAP dollars in the community, which doesn't happen when people don't have SNAP dollars to spend. So it's very vital. These are great talking points to let people know about why SNAP is so important, especially during this time. This is the perfect time to talk to your leaders about why we need to keep SNAP funded. And to correct some misinformation about the program as well. So I always like to throw that slide in there in case you like to do some advocacy work. But there are some review that we'll do here. So the SNAP eligibility factors really involves household composition. So everyone who lives together, purchases and prepares meals together is grouped together as one SNAP household, meaning that that household would have to apply together on one application. Now, if there's roommates, or it doesn't really matter your relationship, if they're roommates, family members, some family members live together. Like, for example, my brother used to live with me in my basement, but he did his own meals. He bought his own meals. So if we wanted to apply for SNAP, we would do so separately, even though we're under the same roof or siblings, it doesn't matter. Now, if we prepared our meals together, and bought our meals together, or one of us went grocery shopping and we charged the other one half of the price for the groceries, then that's considered buying and preparing meals together. So then in that case, we would go on the application together. So that's really important to keep in mind when you're determining who to include on the application and who not to include. And the way that I ask the question when someone asks me, for help applying, my first question is, how many people live in your household, including yourself? I get that number. And then I'll ask, of those three, four people, do you all buy and prepare your meals together or separately? Once I figure that out, the other core eligibility factor is going to be their gross income and their net income. All households are going to be subject to the gross income limits. We're not going to dive into this because this was covered in the last training or two. But they have to meet both the gross, which is your income before any taxes or deductions, and it's any kind of income, not just employment income, but like disability income, Social Security, retirement, things like that. And then net income is your income after taxes and expenses are deducted from your gross. So all households, except for seniors and folks with disabilities, have to meet both the gross and net income limits for SNAP. Seniors age 60 and over, and folks that have disabilities um, only have to meet the net income limit. Everyone else is subject to both. So they also will look at, in addition to, your gross and your net income, what those amounts are, your resources. So how much money do you have in your bank accounts, whether it's a checking, whether it's a savings, whether it's you have a Cash App account, a Venmo account. They're looking at any liquid assets, so money that you can quickly get from that account. That's what they're looking at. And there are certain limits on that, which we're not going to cover because I already covered that in another training. But I just wanted to refresh your memory. These are the things that Department of Human Services will look at to determine your eligibility or your household's eligibility for the SNAP program. And then these are the current income limits for SNAP. If you don't have this chart, you should by now, if you're getting my monthly newsletters I included, I believe in my last one that I sent around the first of this month, should have included some updates about the government shutdown and just a reminder to be using the new income chart, the new income limits that came into effect October 1st, and then a reminder about today's webinar. So make sure you go back and look at that. Make sure you're using this chart if you are helping people look at eligibility for SNAP. And then just a refresher here, these are the resource limits for SNAP for all households. For most households, their assets can't exceed $3,000. For seniors or disabled folks, they cannot exceed $4,500. Even if they pass both the income tests, they still have to also pass the resource limits. Again, I'm happy to do a one-on-one training with you or any staff on what really are the eligibility criteria for SNAP. We could do a whole training on that. I have done a whole training on that. I have a recording, so just definitely let me know if you want to have access to that, and I can share that. So let's get into really the nit and gritty of applying. This should look familiar to you if you've done SNAP applications with people. This is what the front page of the paper application looks like. I am going to try to cover both applications in today's training, the paper and the online, so that you can get a little bit familiar with them. The paper application takes about 5 minutes. The online application can take up to an hour, depending on how many household members you're adding on and things like that. The reason why the online application takes longer is primarily because it expands on a lot of the questions on the application because it's trying to really understand the household situation so that DHS has the information they need to quickly process the case. It's annoying as an application assister that an application can take an hour. That's crazy to me. But it is all for DHS to get as much information as they can so that they can make that determination of approval or denial quicker. And so that that phone interview that they have to do takes less time. That's ultimately why they ask so many questions, in-depth questions on the application. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but I did want to show you what the paper application looks like. The head of household can be listed up here on the name. And then there is a spot here to list everyone in the household. So again, if the person is wanting to apply for SNAP, you would need to know how many people in their household they live with, buy and prepare meals with them. If they're buying and preparing meals together with the head of household person that you're talking to, then those people need to be added here as well. So if you're working with John Smith, he says he has 3 kids in the home. He buys and prepares meals with them, of course. You'll put John Smith's name here, John Smith's name and information on the first line, and then you'll add his 3 children there below. This is the same application that DHS, when I say DHS, I mean Department of Human Services. DHS will use the same application for the Families First program. If you want to help people apply for that, you can by filling out this application. We don't do Family First applications right now. We're just doing SNAP. So just make sure if you are only helping people with SNAP right now, you're checking the program, appropriate program. And then it's pretty basic from here. Some of these questions are optional. Social security numbers, it's pretty clear, not needed. If a person doesn't have one, obviously leave it blank. If a person is not applying, leave it blank. And that can be a little confusing, but let's use the example of a um, mixed immigration status household. So if you participated in the last training or if you know eligibility for SNAP, you know that non-US citizens typically are not eligible for SNAP. But if their children were born in the United States, they can still apply on behalf of their child and receive benefits for their child. But a baby's name can't be the only name listed on the application. DHS is going to have to talk to an adult, right? So you list the parent's name here. You'll list the parent's name here as well, and then the baby's name and information under the parent. But since the parent is not themselves eligible, you're not going to write a social security number here, probably because they don't have one. You will not check the box for if they're a US citizen, and you will put no next to that parent's name of, is this person applying for benefits? No, they're applying for their child, right? Because their child is the only eligible person in their household. But they still have to put their name, date of birth, because DHS has to make sure that person still exists, basically. So I know that's a little confusing, but that's what this question means here. Another example would be if you have a class A felony on your record, then you cannot receive SNAP. You're permanently banned from receiving SNAP. Let's say you're a parent though, and you have children that you want to receive SNAP for. Your household is eligible aside from you being a felon. You still list your name here and here, and then your two children would be below you here. And then you're going to put no for yourself. I'm not applying for SNAP because I know I am not eligible. But my children, I want to apply for them. So the answer would be yes for the two child's names that are listed here. And then I highlighted where people need to sign. So the head of household really needs to sign here. If you are an application assister, meaning you're just walking them through the application, you do not sign or put your name anywhere on the application. You're mostly just helping them answer the questions, right? Some people have comprehension issues or they don't know how to read or write. So that's really where we come in to help them fill this application out. So you're not really signing anything. You're not going to be listed on their application. You'll see that this box appears for Families First. If you have a bunch of copies of applications, I usually mark this box out because we don't help with SNAP, or sorry, we don't help with Families First, so we just mark this out. This question or this box of questions here is also for Families First. You'll see that here where it says FF only, so you can ignore that, mark that out. This is just asking people if they want a copy of their application. And then here you'll see where it asks if they want an authorized representative. You are not going to list yourself as an authorized representative unless you are truly like a case manager that is following. Maybe you're a resident counselor, maybe you are a caretaker or a nurse for somebody. That is maybe where you would list yourself as an authorized representative. But otherwise, you're not going to put anything there unless the person wants, maybe they do have a caretaker or a close friend or family member that doesn't live with them but takes care of their finances, or maybe they're like their power of attorney. Maybe they're an older adult, so they want their younger daughter or son to be listed here, and that's where you would put that. But otherwise, usually this authorized representative stays blank. It'll ask them if they want to register to vote. If they aren't registered and want to register, they can check that they want a mail, DHS to mail them a voter registration form. And then here is where everybody in the household that receives income needs to list their name, the source of their income, and their monthly income amount. An estimate is fine if they receive kind of a fluctuating paycheck every month. Just do an estimate or a range is what I usually tell people to put here. Because later on, they're going to have to submit pay stubs anyway. So DHS will do the math to determine their average monthly pay. And that's what they'll use to actually determine benefit amounts and approval or denial. So if you put a range here and it's not exact on what is on the pay stubs, that's going to be totally fine. For resources, this is where people are going to list the type of resource. So if it's a checking account, even if it has $0 in it, they need to list it as a resource because DHS is going to pull records and see that that person has an account in their name. So even if it has a dollar, $0, or $5, they need to list it. So it's a checking account and they can just put the estimate of how much is in that account at the date that they're applying. Obviously, if you have a checking account and that is your way of moving through life, and paying for things, obviously you could go from 100 to $0 in a day. But at the time that they're filling out the application, I just encourage them to write how much they think is in that account at that time. And then if they have savings account, they'll list savings and then the value or the amount of money in that account. If it's a check, a Cash App account or a Venmo account, they would just write that here and then the amount that's saved up on that account. So pretty straightforward. These are some yes, no questions. Some of them are for Families First, TANF, which is Families First only, but they can answer them. If they leave them blank, that's okay too. They're going to likely ask for them in the interview anyway if they leave these blank. This question here in the middle of the application is for Families First, so I usually leave that blank. And then here at the bottom, these four squares is where people list their expenses. So if they don't have childcare expenses, leave it blank. If they don't have child support that they pay, they leave it blank. Seniors, 60 years or older, or people with disabilities are the only two categories of people that can claim medical expenses and get those deducted from their income. If they have those here, they can list the type. So is this prescriptions? Is this doctor bills? Is this transportation to medical appointments? I know the blanks are small, so if people prefer to add a separate sheet of paper and attach it to the application, they can list out all the type of medical expenses they have and the amounts they pay per month on those. Thing on medical expenses is they're not going to count bills that you owe. So if you owe $5,000 to the emergency room, but you're not paying on it, that's not an expense. That's just at that point, that's a bill, right? So there is a difference. DHS is only going to look at medical expenses that are coming out of that person's pocket, basically, every month. So maybe they do have a $5,000 bill, but they're only paying $50 a month to get it try to get it paid off. That would count as a medical expense. They would just write doctor bill, $50 a month, right? And then, of course, later on, they are going to have to prove that with receipts. So everything that you list pretty much as income, assets in your name, expenses, they're going to have proof of. So we'll get onto that later on. But here's where they list their shelter cost. So you'll know that DHS doesn't really look at a lot of shelter cost. And in fact, there's a lot of things that are not included on the paper application here. So when we look at the online application, you'll see that if someone has a mortgage or they own their home, they very well may pay for property taxes and homeowners insurance. Those are expenses DHS will count, and they're not listed here. So if you are working with people that own their home, make sure you just write in somewhere in this box property taxes and then the amount they pay monthly or annually. And then homeowners insurance, you can abbreviate things, HO insurance, DHS is going to know what that is, and you can list the amount there. So I know that that's annoying that it's not on the application, but I do recommend if you're gonna take the time to really work with someone on doing an application that you just do the online application because it is gonna take DHS much quicker to process that information than looking at the paper application. So let's move on to the online application. This is really your one-stop shop to applying for benefits. And in that customer portal, you can apply for SNAP, Families First, and childcare. And at the end of applying for any of those programs, it'll ask the person if they want to apply for TennCare or Medicaid. And if they want to, they can click the button and it'll link them to the website where they go to apply for TennCare. So it really is kind of a one-stop shop. It's not great. I mean, I try to give DHS a little bit of credit there, but it's not a great system. It's evolving. It's fairly new. I think they created this only like maybe 1.5 years ago. And so they're constantly making adjustments to it, which is a good thing. They're trying to listen to feedback from people like application assisters and take that feedback and make the adjustments to the website. So in that customer portal, not only can you apply for benefits, but you can schedule and reschedule your phone interviews, which is a requirement of the SNAP program. You have to have your phone interview. You can upload your documents. You can check what's going on with your case, see where it is in the process once DHS is processing it. You can view any notices that DHS has sent to you about your case. So maybe you did your phone interview and you haven't heard anything since then. Best bet is that they have sent you a notice that says, hey, we need a verification from you. We need to see your bank account statement to see how much money you have in your account. Well, you can check that in your notices on the customer portal. You can update your information. So if you get approved for SNAP and you need to make a change, your income changed, somebody moved in, somebody moved out, you can report those changes in the customer portal. You can file appeals, and then you can also renew your benefits when it's time to do so. So really do recommend using this online application. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pull up the One DHS customer portal. And then I'm going to share my screen again so that you guys can get a full walkthrough of the online customer portal. And can someone just give me a thumbs up that they can see this? You should see Welcome to One DHS web portal. Can you see this? Okay. I haven't got a thumbs up from anyone, so I don't know if you can see this, but since I am recording this, I'm going to proceed. Here is the Welcome to One DHS Customer Portal homepage. So everything I just talked about, this is the homepage. This is the website. Any information about the portal, as you can see here, they have a little snippet about the government shutdown, letting you know that they are working on figuring out what they're going to do with November SNAP benefits, if anything. If the customer portal is closed down for any reason, it will be listed up here. Sometimes, as I said, they do make adjustments to the portal, so they'll have it closed, usually after hours. But if there's any active information you need to know, it's going to be up here. You can also see they don't have the childcare application available. There's a wait list for it, so they have that notice up here. So I always recommend checking those out. And then I will say the customer portal is closed usually on the weekends. You cannot um, apply for benefits. The reason being is because the state, DHS, has 30 days to make a determination of approval or denial from the time they receive the application. The state does not work on Saturdays and Sundays, so they don't want those 2 days counted at on that 30-day window. So they close the portal down for applying. You can still get in the portal and upload documents, look at notices, update information, things like that, but you can't apply for benefits during the weekend, so on Saturdays and Sundays. They also closed the customer portal down. You cannot apply for benefits on holidays. Yesterday was a holiday for Veterans Day. The portal was closed. And the reason again is because they don't want that day that they're not there working because they're federal state employees. They're closed on all holidays, on all federal holidays. So they're not going to want to have applications come through on days that they're not there because then it counts against them for that 30-day window. If you're working with someone who does not have a customer portal, or maybe they don't know if they've ever created one, the first step you need to do is click create one here. So it says don't have an account, create one here. Click that. And that's going to take you to the create an account page where you'll type in their first name, their last name, their email address, and then you'll create a password for them. Here's the password guidelines. You'll write their cell phone number here or a phone number for them. You'll check this box and this box, and then you'll click next. Make sure that you check those two boxes or it won't let you proceed. Now, if you're not sure if they have a customer portal account already, just put in their email address. And if they already have an account, it'll say this email address already exists. So if that's the case, you don't need to create another account. You just need to log in. If they don't remember their password, use the forgot password button. In that case, it will send them a link to their email to reset their password. Do not try to guess passwords. It will lock you out of the account after two wrong attempts. So if they see that they have an account created, but they don't remember who did that, or maybe they did that years ago and they don't remember the password, chances are it probably expired anyway. Just use the forgot password. I already have an account, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. And if you're working with someone who already has an account and they know their email and password, just go ahead and log them in. You can create yourself an account on here and play around and never apply for benefits. That's why I have this account, because when I started this job, I wanted to make sure I knew everything there was to know about the customer portal before I'm helping people navigate it themselves. So, good idea to create yourself an account and just play around in here, and don't submit anything, just play around. So once you log in, you get to this page. How can we help you? You'll see that there's a bunch of different options. You know, this is the one-stop shop to applying for most government benefits. So for SNAP, if we're wanting to apply for SNAP, it is the first button that says apply for childcare and or family assistance. Doesn't blatantly say SNAP, but that is the option for SNAP. So these first couple questions, or this first page, is just information I've already told you about. It basically just tells people what the process is for applying. So click next. Getting to know you. This is just a pre-screen that DHS has built in. You do not have to do this with people. At this point, when you're helping them do an application, you should already know that they're likely going to be eligible before you sit there and waste your time or their time in applying if they're not eligible. So if you've already done a little pre-screen with them to determine that they're likely eligible, you're just looking to help them apply, go ahead and skip to application. Don't answer those optional questions there. Now you're to the point where the application really starts. So who is applying? Basically, if you are an application assister helping someone apply, they're sitting next to you, they're on the phone with you, click self, because all that you're doing is just typing in the information they're giving you as if they are you. Basically, they just don't know how to use a computer, maybe, or they really don't know how to navigate the system. So click self. The only place where you would click someone else is if it was a power of attorney or a legal guardian that was applying maybe for their elderly sibling or family member. They would click someone else, and then they would choose that they are a relative or a legal guardian, power of attorney, things like that. Those are going to be the most common. Now, if you work in residential treatment or a group home type setting, you can do it that way, but I recommend that if you have the people with you there, you're just helping them apply. You're not listing yourself on the application unless you truly want to be a kind of like guardian for them. But otherwise, it's just going to be self. And then you'll choose SNAP because that's the program you're applying for. Click next. And then from here, it kind of fills in some information it might already know. So you just go in, type in all the information, make sure to choose the language that you speak. Do you need an EBT card? Some people maybe have an EBT card from a past time where they were receiving SNAP. They can certainly use that old EBT card. In that case, they would put no, they don't need a new one. If they've never applied before or they lost their card, then they will need a new one. Do you consider yourself homeless, right? A lot of these questions are pretty self-explanatory, so you'll just go through answering these questions for the person based on the information they're giving you. And then you'll click validate once you have the right address in. It really wants to make sure the address is correct. So always click validate. It says there's multiple errors, but there's not, so just move forward. Do you have a different mailing address? I don't know why all this weird funky stuff is coming in here on my application. So you can fill in the phone numbers, cell phone's best way to contact me, what's the best time of day to call me. They're trying to figure out what is the best time to call you for your phone interview. Do you have a disability or language barrier that requires accommodation? So if you're deaf or hard of hearing, you can click yes and click what kind of assistance you need. Do you need Braille? Do you need TTY? And then that voter registration. You will see these little red plus marks mean optional, and that says it up here. So fields marked with the red plus are not mandatory, but the more you tell us, the faster they can help you. The fields marked with a red asterisk are required. So keep that in mind. You can skip a lot of these questions. I happen to skip a lot of them for time's sake. And then here again, we're getting to that authorized representative question, right? The legal guardian, power of attorney can be listed here. And then those yes, no questions. These are all optional. If you wanted to skip them, I typically ask them because it takes less than 5 minutes to ask them. And then here, these questions are optional as well. I usually skip these as well, but you can ask them if you would like. This is just seeing if the person is eligible for expedited SNAP benefits. Only a select number of people will get expedited benefits. It's typically for people that have had less than $150 in income in the last 30 days and $100 or less in resources. So you can answer those or not. Click next. I'm going to skip through a lot of this just for the purpose of time today because we only have an hour. But you'll see here, we're still on my demographic information. So I'm going to answer these. I'm not going to put, no, now that we're to the social security number, I can leave this blank. I'm going to show you what happens when you leave it blank. Let's use myself as an example. Maybe I'm an immigrant parent. I'm not myself eligible for SNAP, but I have a child who is because they were born in the United States. I'm still listing my information here. I don't have a social security number. I'm not a US citizen. And then we'll ask me for my A number. If I have an A number, I could put it here. I could also leave it blank because it's optional. The A number, providing that A number just helps DHS verify your identity, making sure that you are actually who you say you are. So what happens when I click next? You did not provide us with a social security number. Social security number is optional, but providing us with it helps us process your application. You can go back and add it, or you can click skip, and it will let you proceed. And then you'll just go through continuing to answer the questions. The question about education is asking, is this person in college or university? It's not asking if you're in high school, middle school, elementary school. This is only pertaining to college students. And then some military questions. Do you have a disability? And then what is your home situation? So I don't know if you can see it on my screen, but there is a whole drop down of options: at home, domestic violence shelter, correctional facility, group home, homeless shelter, I'm homeless, hospital. So there's a lot of options there. And then now that we're on the people summary, you'll see that my information is saved here based on what I type in. Now I need to add my child, and I'm going to make up this information for the purpose of this example. Let's say that I have a son. All right. And then you could put in, it's not going to let me type in a fake social security number. So let's pretend I'm typing in his 9-digit social security number. I'm clicking yes, he's applying. Yes, he's a citizen. And let's pretend his social security number is in there. I'm not going to be able to make up a fake one right now. He's not in college. Obviously, he's not old enough. So I'm going to answer all these questions, and he lives at home with me. And then you'll get to this section that says the relationship. So Kyle Shepard, the made up name, is the son of Kaylee Shepard. And I don't know if you can see the drop down, but when you click the drop down next to the name, it has a whole host of information. So it says, is the mother of, is the father of, is the son of, is the daughter of, is the niece of, not related to, stepbrother, stepfather. There's a whole bunch of options. I know I said earlier relationship status doesn't matter, but a lot of people get confused about mixed immigrant status households or roommate situations, and so they may add people unnecessarily on their application. or leave people off their application. And the reason DHS is asking this question is to help with that confusion so that when they get to the phone interview, they know who they're going to be asking about in the household, right? It says, oh, you have a son, as you said on your application. Is that right? Do you have any other children? Right. So it's just to help prepare them for the interview. So the more information they can get, the better. But it doesn't matter if you have children, if you have roommate, that's not going to determine your eligibility. They're just trying to make sure you put the correct information on the application and put on the appropriate people and didn't leave anybody off or add anybody unnecessarily just because you don't understand how SNAP works, which a lot of people don't when they're applying. So that is the point of that question. And then there's the question of, do Kyle and Kaylee prepare meals together? Yes. So now that there's the two people in the household added, you'll click next and it's going to start getting to the other parts of the application. Now we're at the income question. Does anyone have a job? Yes. Is anyone self-employed? No. Is anyone getting income from another source? For this example, let's put yes. And then it's going to ask me to elaborate on my income. So you'll see that there's a lot of more questions on the online application. So you'll see that it starts asking for employer information. I typically leave that blank because I'm going to be providing pay stubs anyway later on. So if I know that I'm adding that information later on by sending in a verification, I'm just going to leave it off because they're going to review my verifications anyway. What I would consider putting is at least, at the very least, I get paid monthly. Let's say I get 20 hours a week and I make $12 an hour. Okay, let's just pretend that is the base information I would recommend putting for income. Does this individual still have the job? Does anyone else in the household have employment income? No. And then I did click on the last page, I clicked that I had some other source of income. So let's pretend that I get child support, legally obligated. So I'll click that. When you click the drop-down list under type of income, you'll see that there's a lot of information there. So there's a lot of options to choose from. And then it's going to ask, when did I start receiving child support? A lot of people don't know like the exact date, so you can leave that blank. At the very least, I would just add how much you receive each month. So let's pretend I receive $300 monthly and click next. And then it brings you to a summary of everything you just typed in. So it'll have my employment income information here. It'll have my child support information entered here as well. Now we're getting to expenses. Do I have childcare expenses? Yes. Do I have living expenses like rent, gas, electricity, phone? Yes. I do not qualify for the medical expense because I'm not disabled and I'm not over the age of 60, so I click no on the medical expenses. And do I make child support payments? No. So when I click next, it's going to ask me again to elaborate on my expenses. So first, it's getting to the childcare expenses. Who pays for them? Me. How often is it paid? Let's say I pay monthly. How much do I pay monthly? Let's say childcare is $2,000 a month. And then it'll ask from this drop down who provides childcare, and it will put my name, my son's name, or someone else. So it recognizes that there might be people in the home that you live in that are providing that childcare. So you can click other people in your household if that's the case. I don't think you can see the drop down. I'm not sure what you can see or can't see when I'm screen sharing, but just know that those are the options. So I'm going to click someone else because I pay a third party person, right? I go through maybe like a childcare, a daycare company. And then when I click someone else, it's going to ask me to elaborate. So what's the childcare provider's name? So I could put the name of the daycare here. Okay. And then it's going to ask me to elaborate on the other expenses I said I had, like shelter expenses. When I click shelter expense type, it's going to have what kind of expense is this? Is this rent? Is this lot rent if you live in a trailer park? Is this a mortgage payment? Is this property taxes? Is this homeowner's insurance, right? So you can elaborate quite a bit here on the application. But for my example, I'm just going to choose rent. And then how often is it paid monthly? And let's say I pay $1,800 a month for rent. Does anyone else in the household pay for shelter expenses? So if I had a boyfriend or a husband living with me, let's say, and we split the rent, then they would be added to the application because they are in my household. I am buying and preparing meals with them. And then in this question, we could put yes, that we split the rent. And then when I click yes, it's going to ask who else is paying. And then I would choose my partner's name from that list. So it's pretty self-explanatory. As you answer questions, it'll expand on those a little bit. And then here we get to utility expenses. Who pays for those? That would be me. Does this expense include heating or cooling? Yes. And then it'll ask the type of expenses you pay and the monthly amount that you pay for those. So you'll just take the total amount of those. Let's say I pay $200 a month for water, electricity, and phone. Click next, and then you'll see that everything I just typed in is an expense summary is here. You kind of see the trend here where we're going, but you can always go back to different parts of the application. On the left-hand side here, you can go back to people if you forgot to add somebody. You can go back to income if you remembered that you do get a pension or something, you can go add that there. So you can always go back in and make changes. If you're running low on time or the person that you're helping has to leave, you can always click save and exit. It will save the application up to the point where you left off for 48 hours. And you can go back in within those 48 hours and finish and submit it. After 48 hours, if you don't touch it, it disappears. So just keep that in mind. We're going to click next, and now we're at the resources. Does anyone in the household have resources? Let's say for this example, I don't have any bank accounts except for my checking account. So I'm going to list the account here, who owns the account. That would be me. The type of account is a checking, and I have $100 in it. And then my resource summary, right? So everything I just entered is summarized here. Click next. And then now we're at the end. We're at the application summary. Everything I've entered up to this point is here. I can go back and edit things, right? It's pretty nice. Click next if everything looks good. And then this is going to tell me what my rights and responsibilities are. I don't normally read these off to people because they can always go back into their customer portal and access this at any time. I don't have 10 minutes to spend to read all of this to them, but you will need to check I have read and understand my rights and responsibilities, and then click next. And then now we're at the point where we have some questions about families first. So school, anything about school attendance records, books from birth, that's all families first. So ignore that. You do not need to click yes or no on these, just ignore it. And then to sign the application, you would type the head of household's name exactly as you entered it on the application, and then today's date. Okay? I am not going to submit this application because that is all fake information I entered. So I just wanted to show you that this is how you submit the application for the purpose of this example. But in the event this is a real life thing, you would click submit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you the page that you will get after you click submit. Okay. So after you click submit, this is the screen that you're going to see. It's going to say, congratulations, your application has been submitted. It'll give you application number, and this is a screenshot I grabbed of an application I did help someone submit. So some things are blacked out here for their protection. And then you'll also see that there is an option to schedule your phone interview. Absolutely 100% do that. If you can't, then DHS will schedule it for you. But I always recommend if you've got the person in front of you, you've helped them get this far, just go ahead and help them schedule that interview. When you click schedule now, it's going to give you dates, 3 dates to choose from. So you can click the date that works best for that person. And then once you click the date, it's going to give times that are available on that date. And they usually are in 30-minute increments. So if they say the 7th is a good date, click the 7th and then choose the time. And then make sure the below information is correct. So it should have their name and phone number that you included on the application. And then click the blue schedule appointment button. And then if you're ever like, oh no, I just forgot what I clicked, you can always go back to the dashboard. And I didn't show you what that looks like because there's not going to be anything on my dashboard because I've never applied for anything or scheduled anything for myself. But I took some screen grabs from that same person that I helped. And when we go back to the dashboard, which is kind of the home page of that customer portal account, you'll see pretty much anything relating to your case there. You'll see any upcoming appointments you have, which will be phone appointments. You'll have any pending applications or submitted applications showing there. So you'll be able to see that that was the appointment we scheduled for the phone interview. So if they call you back the next day and say, hey, you helped me schedule a phone interview, I didn't write it down. Can you tell me what that is? You can tell them to go into their customer portal with their login information and look that up there, or you can help them log in over the phone and then look up the appointment there. And then same thing I just said, you can always go back to your dashboard. Dashboard is kind of your home screen. Scroll down to applications and you'll see that the application was submitted. And this is just an example of what it would look like when DHS has received and is processing your application. So this person applied for SNAP and Families First, and the case status says pending. That typically means either the phone interview hasn't happened yet, or the phone interview has happened, and they are working on processing all the information to get an approval or denial. And then on the customer portal dashboard, you'll see there's options for my submissions, my notices. My submissions is where the person is going to go to upload verifications or to see what verifications they have uploaded. So once they've uploaded documents, it'll look like this. They can always, everything is time stamped, so they can always go back and see, oh, yep, I did submit my copy of my ID and they said they didn't get it, right? So everything's time stamped, and that's a great benefit to doing the online application. And then here's an example. I'm just putting a bunch of examples here so you can kind of see, but a verification request. So let's say the person had their phone interview and DHS needs something further from them. This is an example of a notice that would be uploaded in the customer portal under My Notices. It will say what they're looking for. So this example in particular, this person was an ABOD and they need to prove that they are exempt from the work requirement or the ABOD work requirement. So that's what they're looking for. And if I remember correctly, this person recently lost their job and was in the process of looking for a new job. And so DHS needed to see that they were no longer working, proof of that, and proof that they are either currently looking for work or volunteering at least 20 hours a week or more, since those are kind of the ABOD work requirements. So that's what DHS was asking for. All right, so those are just some examples I showed you, but I do recommend creating your own account through the customer portal website so you can look and see for yourself where all those different things are. We have about 10 minutes left, so now I want to cover, assuming someone has been approved for SNAP, let's start talking about what they need to do in order to keep those benefits and make sure that they don't lose them. So anybody that's approved for SNAP gets kind of classified into a recertification period. It's based on it's based on a couple things like your age and your household situation, your income, things like that. DHS will always notify the person when they need to recertify. And if they don't keep their mailing address up to date, then that is a barrier because then you're not going to be getting the letters that you are receiving from DHS. But if they've done everything through the customer portal, they can also be notified of the recertification date in there. Anytime it is time to recertify, it will always pop up in the customer portal on the person's dashboard, and it'll have a button for need to recertify, do so here. So it's very clear once the person logs in, goes to their customer portal dashboard of what they'll need to do. If they don't recertify when it's time to, their benefits will stop and they'll be terminated from them. And they can only get them again if they reapply and go through the whole application process again, meaning submitting a new application, having a new phone interview, and submitting your documents all over again. So it's just recommended that they don't do that and that they recertify. If they're moving from county to county, they don't need to necessarily do anything. They can notify their office that they've moved, change their address, right, and update that. You can also update your information and address in the customer portal. So you don't need to wait on the phone for an hour or more just to get that information changed. If they move out of state, they do need to apply. I need to change the information on this slide. You don't need to reapply in the new county, but you do need to close your case out in the state of Tennessee if you're going to move to another state and try to apply for another state's SNAP program. So that has to happen before you can do that. But county-wise, you don't need to reapply. You just need to let DHS know you've moved, and you can do that via the customer portal account. Most households get put in the change reporting classification period. So that means they're approved for SNAP typically for 3 to 4 months. And you typically will be a self-employed adult if you fall within this category. The reason why this is such a short certification period is because DHS recognizes self-employed adults typically have evolving income. So they want to make sure this person still qualifies for SNAP. So this person will get a notification usually around the 3 month mark, letting them know they need to change to fill out a change report form, noting any changes or not by the 10th day of the next month after your change occurs. So that's pretty annoying to do if you don't have any changes, but this is something that a lot of households will have to do. You'll put all that information on the form. You can do a paper form or you can do it online as well. So either one is fine. If you do paper, you have to drop it off or mail it to DHS. Other households more commonly might be subject to just the 4 to 6 months classification period. This typically applies to most households with children or ABODs, so those able-bodied adults without children, without dependents, people who are working, right? Households should receive notification of this recertification date in the mail or as a notice in their customer portal 2 months prior to the expiration of their current SNAP benefits. So if they get approved, probably around that 2 to 3 month mark, they're going to get a letter that says, this is when your SNAP benefits terminate. Here's what you need to do in order to keep them. So they need to recertify. The recertification application is done through the customer portal, or you can get a paper application, fill it out, and submit it. It does involve doing another phone interview. And in some cases, you may need to submit verifications to show DHS what has or hasn't changed. Households that are 60 years older or have disabled folks that live there typically only need to recertify every year to 2 years, so every 12 to 24 months. This is because DHS recognizes a lot of these folks are on fixed incomes that don't usually fluctuate a lot. So if you fall within this category, you will get a notification in the mail or in the customer portal under My Notices when it's time to do your mid-certification form. So seniors and folks with disabilities, they need to be made aware of this because they do still have to do this. Um, it's just a form, and then in some cases, DHS will ask for verification. Typically, they're just looking to see that Social Security letter to see if their income changed at all throughout the year. To keep benefits past the 24 months, same here, pretty much the same as the 12 to 24 months. You just have to do the recertification application. So it is kind of confusing to keep up with who has to do what form, but if you have a customer portal account or you keep your address updated with DHS, they're going to send you a notice in the mail basically outlining every single thing you need to do. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And do we have any questions? No questions? Okay, if there's no questions, let's go on to the trivia question. Reminder about trivia, you need to put your answer in the chat. Whoever answers it first and closest to the correct question, closest to the correct answer will win a $10 gift card, and I'll email you after to get that to you. So, and do not Google this. If you Google it, you'll probably get the wrong answer anyway, because this is kind of a trick question. But the question is, in what decade was the food stamp program, also known as SNAP, originally started? So, what decade was the food stamp program originally started? All right, Haley has guessed the 70s. Got two more people, 60s. Okay. And then Kanisha, we're just waiting on your answer. So whoever gets closest to it will win the $10 gift card.
I can't figure out how to use the chat. Forgive
Okay,
me for coming off
it's
of
okay. You can say,
mute. I'm going to say 78,
okay.
1970.
All right. So we have 70s, 1978. So two 70s and one 60s. And the answer was the 30s. So that might be shocking to some of you, but during the Great Depression, which is when the decade of the 30s, 1939 is when the first food stamp program started. So it operated by permitting people were on relief to buy orange stamps. It was actual stamps that you bought, or like little, kind of like what you would put on an envelope, right? A stamp like that, not like an ink stamp. But you would buy orange stamps equal to their normal food expenditures, and then for every dollar worth of orange stamps that you bought, you would get 50 cents worth of blue stamps. And then, so the orange stamps you bought, you could use for whatever food you wanted. And then the 50 cents worth that you would get in the blue stamps, you could use for foods determined by the government, basically to be surplus foods. So foods that they may have worked out with farmers to put in grocery stores that weren't selling as well, or that they had an abundance of, you could use your blue stamps for those. So that's kind of how the program was first designed, right? That was kind of the prototype for the food stamp program. And then in the 1964 is when the Food Stamp Act became permanent and made it a permanent program. So the answer is the 30s, technically, right? Because that was the prototype for the food stamp program that they operated for that many decades. And then in the 60s, they said, all right, let's sign it into an official program. But the 30s is the prototype. So I guess whoever guessed the 60 was the closest. So Elizabeth, you were closest to 30s. So I will get with you via email to get that $10 gift card to you. But I appreciate if you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to stop recording now.